Hi everyone, Tally and Pharaoh here from Boardavit, and welcome to our review of Faiyum, a fairy pleasing simulator for 1 to 5 players. And no, not like that, don't be dirty. Instead, you'll be transforming the Faiyum Basin into an oasis of Egypt, attempting to do it better than the other advisors so that you become the Pharaoh's most respected advisor.
Now, with a simple rule set, but over 60 unique action cards, Faiyum is a game that falls into the genre of easy to learn but hard to master. And because these unique action cards are shuffled and they will come out in a different order every game, players will end up having different decks every time they play, meaning that each time you play you have to pursue a unique strategy for that game. Add to this the fact that anything players build on the board is owned by the Pharaoh, not themselves, and you get a wonderfully collaborative and sometimes antagonistic game about the Faiyum Basin. When the game begins, you'll have a board filled with crocodiles, a single settlement, and a bridge. But you'll also have a hand of 5 starting cards, 3 of which are farmers, 1 of which will let you build roads, 1 of which will let you build a settlement. Now, on your turn, in terms of actions, there are really only 3 things you can do. You could play a card from your hand in front of you and use the action on that card. You could buy a card from the marketplace, or you could enter administration. Generally, in the early stages of the game, you're pretty much going to be using your farmers because these will allow you to put a worker down and remove a crocodile. And then you'll get the matching resource of where you put that worker. Then, once you have a few resources, you can spend them to build settlements or construct roads, which will give you what we will term from now on Pharaoh points. However, eventually the marketplace will draw your eye because of the tantalizing options available. These unique cards will evolve the gameplay and elevate your strategy. Maybe you'll snag a senior farmer who will allow you to get 2 resources instead of 1 when you farm with them. Maybe you'll become a town builder and turn settlements into towns for big Pharaoh points. Eventually, you're going to want to take your played cards back into your hand. Now, this is where the administration action comes in because it'll allow you to get a little money, to remove workers from the board, and take the top 3 cards of your discard pile back into your hand. You can also add more cards, but for every card you add after those 3, you pay $1 and you go top down. So it's very important in terms of the order of which you play your cards, because if you play a powerful card too early, it can be stuck at the bottom of your discard pile and will cost a lot of money to get back. Now, administration will also reshuffle the marketplace with the 2 cheapest value cards going out, although this can change based on the number of players. So these 2 will go out, 2 new cards will enter the marketplace, and you'll reshuffle them in numerical order. And the reason for this is it moves the game along because you have 2 decks. You have the main marketplace deck, which is just filled of normal cards that you can buy. Then you also have this end game marketplace deck, which you start using once you finish the normal deck. And this end game deck contains 4 natural disasters, which are kind of dead cards, 4 end game scoring cards, and 4 normal cards, but just with a high value. And once all of these natural disaster cards have been drawn, they'll enter the board. They can't be bought, so they always stay up here. And it just means that at this point, nobody can ever do the administration action again. And at that point, players will then keep playing or buying cards until they can't do anything else and they want to pass. When every player has passed, the game will end, and whoever has the most Pharaoh points at this time will win. Good old Pharaoh points. Honestly, this is only our 2nd Freedom and Freeze game, and the first one we played, Power Grid, it wasn't a big hit with us, so we didn't go into this expecting a lot. But we were both pleasantly surprised, and I myself just really enjoy this game. However, I think it sits at a weird juncture in terms of how it plays, and I can see it being very much a Marmite game in that you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. I think people like myself are going to find a diverse sandbox of strategy, with each game feeling unique and you having these little patterns of strategy coming out from game to game that are always changing. and others are just going to find it long, uninteresting and repetitive.
But let's start at the very beginning. One of the greatest things about Faiyum is the ease of the teach. There's only really 3 actions you can do and they're all pretty simple. Also, there's only 3 distinct starting cards, so once you've explained those and taught those, you just really start playing. And if anyone has any questions about the new cards that come up on the marketplace, you can just pass them the wine list and say, look it up yourself, and each card has a really full explanation of what it does, and sometimes it goes along with a corresponding example. So very, very quick and easy teach. Now, it isn't to say that it isn't annoying to be continuously checking the wine list, because it is, and you'll be likely constantly checking it for a fair few games. One of our biggest criticisms is there's only 1 wine list included in the box, so it becomes a nightmare at 5 players to be continuously waiting for the list. Generally, actions in Faiyum are pretty speedy, particularly when players get to grips with their cards, so it does kind of torpedo the rhythm of the game when a particularly interesting card comes out on the market and everyone is just waiting for that list. Even if you do learn all of the cards, any new players are going to have a disadvantage because they don't have any understanding of the importance of certain cards or any foreknowledge of what cards to look out for.
But damn if inconvenience isn't worth it, because the cards themselves and the way that they're all unique and they combo together is a highlight of game design. You know, in one game, I became Faiyum's premier perfumer. I was basically growing roses, then duplicating the roses. Then I had a 3rd card that let me turn the roses into perfume and get Pharaoh points for it. In another game, I was a town planner and a tour guide. I was focused on turning settlements into towns, and then at the end, I will take the Pharaoh on a nice little tour across of all my hard work for a lot of points. And I'm just fascinated by the diversity in these cards, yet the way that they all seem to combo together in such interesting ways that in most of the games you play, you'll probably be undertaking a novel route to victory. Faiyum is full of interesting mechanics. Just taking administration as an example and the way it works, it provides such meaningful, weighty decisions, because on one hand, you want to play your cards in the optimal manner, so you can get them back efficiently when you take administration. But on the other hand, you're going to be put under pressure from other players when they race up the track. And you're going to want to play the cards in a way to maximize points to keep the pressure on, or just be in front of the pack. And there's no real right way of choosing between these two, which makes it such a fun and interesting dilemma. And then if you take the way administration works in the end game, because once all 4 natural disaster cards are drawn in the end game, you can no longer take administration. So when you take your final administration is crucial, and it will probably be the difference between winning and losing. The fact that you could go into the end game with a full hand of cards, or just the fact that you've literally shut another player out of being able to take administration, meaning that they only have about 3 or 4 turns left before they have to pass.
Or take the way all of the pieces are shared. It means once you know how other players are scoring, you can antagonise them in weird and wonderful ways. Or alternatively, you can score big points from all of their hard work with the right card. It's also a lovely element of gameplay to watch your basin progress from a swamp-filled hellhole to a bustling, developed region of Egypt. Another aspect we've found fascinating is the intensity of the race for points. It reminds us most of Castles of Burgundy, a game where you feel immense pressure every time you're falling behind because the points are flowing so freely. It's a really intense experience being behind, and we secretly love it. Secondly, despite the fact that the players obviously end up with quite distinct decks of cards and different ways to score points at the end of the game, our games have all come remarkably close together in terms of scoring points, which is a strong indicator of excellent game design at work. What's most interesting about this is that Faiyum feels like a game that could be decided by luck, so you'd expect wider swings in points. Due to the interactivity and the way the marketplace is constantly in flux, which cards come out when, whether they'll fit into a strategy, and whether the players can afford them, could be crucial game deciders that nobody can do anything about. It leaves us in a weird position because it's actually not something we've seen occur, but it's just worth bearing in mind.
If we're going to level a criticism at Faiyum, it would be that it's actually quite a repetitive game, hiding under a coat of many, many unique actions. Because in practice, it would be fair to say that although these components are often unique looking, they don't actually act uniquely in gameplay. Yeah, you have a bridge, but it's essentially the same as a road. It just goes over water. And I think this is going to cause a lot of people to bounce off Faiyum because they'll find it too dry, too uninteresting, and too repetitive. It's like, yeah, now I can build a town, but what is the difference between a town and a settlement besides this piece and the fact that I get more points from doing it? So if you can't install your imagination into Faiyum, I think you might struggle to connect with it. But what we will say about these components is that because they're unique, and a lot of later cards, particularly scoring cards, require earlier cards to be in play, e.g. in the player's hands. Some games, they'll just be shuffled out of the marketplace, so components will never enter the board. This changes how players score, the landscape of the board, and it just presents new and interesting problems each time you play. For example, the last game we played, nobody could build any towns, which meant a lot of powerful cards at the end were utterly useless, creating lateral ways of scoring and big fights for the cards that didn't require towns to be in action, making for a much more exciting game.
It's also worth noting the wonderful components, many of which are unique. The game has great table presence from start to finish. There's just an incredibly satisfying tactility to building your own oasis. And moving on to the cards, we're pleased to report they are good quality. But the symbology on those cards, not so much. Rather than having reams of text, each card generally just has a title and some symbology, with the full description of the card being found in the wine list. However, the symbology is pretty unengaging and can be easily misunderstood, and you will end up accidentally breaking the game. It seems they've gone for style over substance when the players would have been better served just having a little bit more text on the cards. Unfortunately, like any building project, it goes on too long. Faiyum goes on just that bit too much longer than it really needs to, particularly at lower player counts where less cards are being bought and administration is occurring less often. Worse, it gets slower the longer the game goes on because the players have more cards in their deck, so the time in between administrations is getting longer and longer. We both just feel like Faiyum would really shine if it knocked about 15 to 20% off the playtime, but as it stands, it's a slight dampener on a game that we otherwise find very interesting. So we prefer to play it at higher player counts just because it shortens the game, but also makes it that much more cutthroat in terms of competition for space and cards. So where does that leave us? Well, we're pretty happy to recommend Faiyum. It's gone down really well with all of our gaming group, with everyone remarking how much they enjoyed the low rules overhead and the diverse gameplay. Has some really interesting mechanisms and systems, whilst the depth of unique cards creates a game that feels challenging and novel every time we play.
And yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, we mentioned the symbology, the length and the pacing, and the fact that it is a dry Euro. There's nothing about this game that is exciting when you play it. But there is a lot of interesting gameplay, design at work here. And I think another thing is that if you can't impart some imagination into the game and what you're doing, you'll struggle to get repeat plays out of it because you'll just find it repetitive. But for us, because of all the nice things we've said previously, the fact that it's easy for us to get to the table and that it occupies a novel space in terms of how it plays in our collection, we're going to keep it and we're going to keep playing it. So I hope that you get the chance to play it at least once because there is some interesting stuff at work here. That was our review of Faiyum. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please comment and we'll happily answer you. If you have any other Friedman Freeze recommendations, please let us know. And if you're not subscribed already, it would really mean the world to us if you could subscribe because we give the dogs treats.
Yeah.
And treats are the most important thing in the world to them, so you'll make them happy.
Well, Meg's after these crocodiles on the table here, so...
Yeah, because she has the same head shape as one.
Yeah.
But most importantly, thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Bye.